Hi, I'm Coach Nate. I'm a low master support main that really enjoys coaching other people in Overwatch. As such, I have several hundred hours of VOD reviews of people of all ranks and roles. This video is part of a series of videos that I'm doing right now, where I'm going to look at common themes that I see in a lot of different VODs that I've reviewed. So over many different VODs, I noticed trends in what players do, and especially in Plat and Below, where um, many different players will be making the same mistakes. So what I'm going to be doing is a VOD review in each of these videos where I focus on one or two key themes specifically, and I'll make that the theme of the VOD review. So if you are a player that is Plat and Below, and you feel that you've been stuck at your rank for a while, and you're looking for answers how to climb, this video is specifically for you. I hope to help this group of people the very most. If you are not stuck or you have been climbing, you still may gain value out of it. Perhaps you're making some of these mistakes and you just aren't being held back by them yet. So it may still be in your interest to view them. I've thought of a way to make this series a little bit more interesting and engaging for some of you, and to provide you with a skill set, or help you to improve a skill set. What I'm going to do is create a link to the video that I'm reviewing right now, and I challenge you to do your own VOD review on it. And while in this series I'm only going over very specific themes that I see being a major part of this particular person's gameplay, there will be other things that are not as important that I'll just skip over entirely on purpose. I want to see if you can find those things, and perhaps you'll find some things that I don't. But what I'm going to do is I'll do a second video where I just focus on the things I do find, and we'll see if you find them too. What I hope you get out of this is the ability to find things on your own and describe them, and perhaps identify some mistakes that you see in other people's gameplay. That'll help you to do VOD reviews on someone else, but there may be some things that you discover that this person's doing that you are doing as well. And the power of that is sometimes when you do your own VOD reviews on yourself, you just don't see the things you're doing. But if you see someone else doing it, then you're more likely to pick up on that, and you can then relate it back to what you're doing. Like, oh yeah, I do that too. I'm starting to notice it. So perhaps you'll get that benefit out of it. There are two themes that I want to go over in this video. The first theme is to respect the enemy DPS. Don't give them free opportunities to kill you for no reason. The second theme is to use your communication in order to set your team up for better success in regards to alts. So there's a couple different ways to do this. First of all, do alt tracking and look at what your team has coming up for alts in the next fight, so you can help prepare them to use them together, and maybe talk about some alt combos that they can initially use, and perhaps to save the other alts that they have. The second way is to recognize whether or not a team fight is going to be won for sure, or most likely, or to be lost most likely, and to save alts based on that. So if you know that you're going to win a team fight, there's no need for your team to invest extra alts and waste them. You could have that for the next team fight. And if you know your team is going to definitely lose this fight that they're in, there's no sense in using your alts for most of the time, because you lose the opportunity to use them in a better situation. And by communicating this, you can definitely set your team up for better success, because having an alt advantage or more alts to invest in situations that you can really make the most out of them can really steer the course of the game in your favor and cause your team to win. I've noticed, like, especially in like gold and gold and below, a lot of team fights are won because one team successfully used their alts. And it's not because somebody got a key pick. It's because one team used their alts and it worked out in their favor. So that being such, if you're able to set your team up to have an alt advantage and more alts to use in better situations, then you have a huge advantage at a huge leg up in winning that fight or to winning that game. Something else to talk about in regards to alt tracking is getting better at tracking enemy alts. And so if you know that the enemy is most likely has an alt online, there's a good chance that they're going to use it next fight. If you're able to talk to your team about that and make them aware that this is going to happen or most likely going to happen, then you can talk about positioning and things that your team can do in regards to that. So this alt tracking in regards to this happens in between fights. So not while you're in a fight, but during a downtime and before the enemy is engaging with your team again. So what you do is you figure out what they probably have, and then you let your team know that you most likely have it, and then you make a suggestion of what your team can do in order to avoid falling into this trap. This can help your team to really get out of a lot of bad situations and to minimize the enemy team's chance of success.
시그마 자리야 솔 한쪽.
Okay, so the person talking is not the player in the video, but what they're doing is important. Gathering information of what the enemy team is running. And before you know what the team is running, you need, especially on a good sniper map like this map, you need to play safe. So we know that they at least have one sniper at this moment, so our positioning should be respectful of that.
그래.
위도 한쪽.
잠깐.
All right, so they have double snipers. We know that now.
Woo, come here. Wound.
All right, so currently because you're flying around, you have less chance of being hit. So I'm okay with this positioning, and they're not quite up to the choke here yet.
Behind.
잠깐.
All right, so we know that the Widow can aim for sure. This is not resable. It would be very difficult to be resable. It may be resable, but we don't know where their Hanzo is yet. So going up there is not the safest bet. Because of that, so what I'd be thinking of doing right now is going behind this sign as Mercy, because you could still heal most of your team, which are all resided in this central location here, but you are not putting yourself in the line of sight of either of the snipers, most likely. So let's take a look at this map from a top-down view, and we'll discuss why that is. We're talking about sight lines. All right, so this is where we're at. Your location is right here currently. Your team is mostly right here. And the enemy team, a bulk of them, is right here. The sight lines available to either of these snipers. So on this map, when you get about here, a sniper can snipe from here. You can snipe from through here. You can take the high ground and snipe through there. Or they can come through the cave to the side here, the tunnel. And all of those sight lines lead to where you're standing in one way or another. In recognition of that, where I suggest you'd go instead is here, behind the sign. You eliminate most of those opportunities, and maybe somebody could still flank over here and get you, perhaps, but it's still more difficult. At the same time, you still have the safety of being close, or you're still somewhat safe because you're close to the rest of your team. At least they can peel for you, and at least you can still heal them and damage boost them and do other useful things. So that's why I recommend this spot as opposed to anywhere else in the map. It's the best spot for you to be right now. All right, let's see what happens. Okay, so because you're standing here and that line of sight is not being respected, this guy is shooting you already. I immediately would try to get to cover somewhere else, some bit of safety, and maybe use a bit of a strafe pattern to not go in a straight line there, so make yourself harder to hit.
Shield up.
But you kind of move in a straight line, and you you move in a direction that puts you more in danger.
Shield up.
Okay, so now we're here at the next respawn with your team. This is good. You're about to be approaching the fight. Now, the first thing you need to do when respecting the enemy DPS when they're snipers is to play safely when you come out in the open, and you try to figure out where they are. You need that information. They have the power to pick you off when you don't know where they are. They can be coming from anywhere, and you may be potentially in a threatening situation. So you need to play with that in mind as you're going back to the fight here.
I don't know where the
So you got to be looking around and moving in a way that's harder to be hit right now.
fuck the Reinhardt,
Is
man.
what I'd be saying. That was a good thing to do. That turn there.
Fucking hell. Can you raise me? Wait, don't rise.
And the reason being, I should say, is as you move your characters around and look down with a lot of different characters, it changes the position of their headshot hitbox, and it also changes the character animation, so their body is in different locations. It makes it much harder for you to be sniped. So follow that pattern. That's good to do, folks.
Behind enemies.
All right, so you know the Widow's there. I wouldn't be getting on top of the cart if you didn't have to. I would use the cart for cover.
Zarya couple. Zarya couple.
You're right out here in front of both snipers. Bad choice. They're not shooting at you, but they should be.
Kill Zarya.
Widow row. Couple. Nice.
And that's another good thing to do. What this other player is doing is calling out positions of snipers. So, especially as support, you want to let your team know where these high threat DPS are at all times, so that they don't get accidentally picked off for no reason, and that your DPS themselves have a chance to have an advantage in that fight. Because if they don't know, if they're trying, their job is to hopefully pick those DPS off. So if they don't know where they are and they're trying to go and do their job, they can just be picked off without that information. So you give them an advantage in that fight.
Maybe C9? Moira 할게.
Right.
All right. Here, we could be making a similar mistake. We are out here in the open again, and we're not thinking about where the enemy DPS can or cannot be at the moment. You got to be thinking about these sight lines. And while you may be thinking about the sight lines, but you're not positioning in such a way that you minimize the available sight lines that you're exposed to. So it's a very similar thing to last time.
Zarya couple.
And you die the same way. All right. So now we're on Moira.
I'm playing like shh.
Okay. The thing you need to be thinking as you come up to this doorway is figuring out where the enemy team is coming from. So first of all, if I'm a support and I'm coming out here, sometimes I wait for somebody else to go out in front of me, see what happens. Maybe they'll get shot at, and then you just from that information you can figure out where the enemy DPS are. Also, while going out here, I wouldn't recommend jumping too much. It makes you possibly easier to hit, and then I would be thinking about ways to get out here safely without just being immediately picked off. Because every time you come out of a specific doorway like this one, where your team is very much expected to come through here, a lot of times you'll have snipers trained on that area, training their sights on that area just to pick you off.
Shit.
I think that we should also note that there's a soldier instead of one of the snipers right now.
저희가 Zarya out.
All right. So this is the first incident of the other theme that we were talking about, alt combos. So they haven't really used much of their alts yet, if any, and we should expect by now that they do have them. So you can be talking about they might have Grav Dragon combo. split up, expect it to be coming, etc. And see, this is very telegraphed. So the Zarya leaves the rest of her team, jumps right into the middle of your team, who are all grouped up in a very dangerous fashion, and just grabs right in the middle. Like, you can see that coming a mile away. So if you're telling your team to expect it, when she goes and does a move like this, they might see this coming. It might be a good telltale sign and help some of them to avoid this.
내가 자리하고
So this is a team fight won in their favor just because they use an alt combo. Successfully, that is.
The fuck is...
Alright, let's see what happens next.
고 자리야.
Alright, again, be thinking about where the DPS are and how you're coming out here. If you're not entirely sure, you can fade through here. Alright, and then you just walked into open space where the majority of your team are. So you didn't have the information where the Hanzo was yet, and you went out into the open area where you can be easily picked off. And he's just spamming your entire team. So I don't know if he's aiming for you, but he doesn't have to. He can still get a lucky pick just by doing what he's doing, simply by where your team is located out in the open here. So let your tanks be out in the open. You don't have to be there yet. Use cover. All right, here's the next opportunity to be talking about alt tracking and how we're going to use the alts that we have. So right now, the player on the screen is coming up on Coalescence, and they haven't discussed this with anybody else to let them know. And although I guess they have used my ultimate is ready button, letting people know through voice that you're intending to use it and letting them know specifically when you're going to use it is great to be doing. Like, for instance, it looks like their intention here is to use their ult so their team can press in and do damage and maybe win this team fight. So in that case, I'll be like, I have Cole, press in right now, let's wipe them out. So second theme, alt tracking, communication about alts coming up with the enemy, also your team has, whether or not to invest them, etc. Here's another example of how you could be doing this in this fight. All right, so they got their grab combo coming up again. So first of all, you could be talking about that as a possibility so that your team doesn't get involved in it. Now let's look at what happens here. So they do get some people with this combo, or at least partially with a combo. Second of all, Nano is invested to save the Reinhardt. And third, you get a McCree ult invested in order to counteract it. So you've invested 2 ults of your own because you were in a position where that was not to your advantage. So the enemy, by utilizing their combo correctly, forced you into position, your team into a position where they felt the need to act. So by simply eliminating that the effectiveness of this ult by positioning differently as a team, so if you're able to communicate and your team follows through and positions differently, you minimize the impact of what they're trying to do, and therefore your team may not feel the need to act in order to counteract what they're doing. So if the other team can't make a successful play on your team here, then your team does not feel pressured to respond to them, and that's something that allows your team to have control instead of being controlled. So if they feel forced to act and then they do, then they're responding. They're playing into the hands of what the enemy team is doing. Now this may turn out in their favor, but you want to have the most freedom and choices of how you want to act, and not to be forced into action. All right. And then you could be talking about the desire to do this again too. always let people know if you can that you're about to alt, because even a split second delay between when they take action based on your alt is a big difference. You can get more alt charge in there. You let them immediately know what they can be doing upon the moment, at the very moment that you apply your alt. Okay, so here we are in round two, the beginning of round two. I might, so you see that they had the Hanzo coming out the door. I might apply a little bit of a movement pattern trying to walk out the door. Or maybe even fade. The chances of him hitting you from there are, maybe lower than if you were up closer. But you can use a crouch combo and a little bit of a 80 strafe to come out of there. That that will ensure, or at least give you a much higher chance of not being hit. And where you are right now, this is good. You've really minimized the number of sight lines available to you. This is respecting the enemy DPS.
Taco is funny. I like it. No homo.
I might look to the left in the tunnel while crossing through there, just to have the information of where the enemy team is not, hopefully, or it happens to be.
S or not.
All right, coming around this corner, this is where a lot of angles are about to be opened up to you. So try to figure out where the enemy DPS are right now before being completely available to be hurt by them. Your enemy, your Reinhardt is not about to will. I don't know who the heck's over there, but you're not in range to heal them anyways. So where you could be is on the other side of the cart. Use the cart for cover.
Wait. Don't.
Nice.
All right, so you see the Ashes up there. She possibly could have a mercy damage boost, which is pretty much a one shot on a lot of squishies.
Push.
Push. One push.
All right. Saying to push right here is a good thing to do. I'll say that is a very good thing to do if you're a support. I know that's not part of the theme, but if you're up in numbers and your team would definitely win a fight, calling this out immediately to your team, especially in a rank like gold, is going to help tremendously. It really helps you capitalize on winning the fight quicker and just taking advantage of the initiative.
Zarya flipping. Nice.
Wow. Bro.
Oh, where? Okay.
Right now, I'd be hitting tab because this is a one fight. I'd be hitting tab to see what DPS alts, or I'm sorry, what alts your team has coming online, and I might be thinking about whether or not somebody on the enemy team is building their alts up quickly. And you can do this by hitting tab and looking at if somebody's on fire. Is somebody actually doing work? Now, I don't think anybody's doing anything useful to a large degree on the enemy team. It's very doubtful that they have their alts yet, but at least if you hit tab, you know that whether or not they're actually being more useful than you thought. Another good thing to be doing is if you get a good team wipe like this, or irregardless, it's nice to hit tab to see if the enemy team has switched. So if your team crushes the enemy team immediately, sometimes the DPS will switch what they have going on to a different character. Okay, so we're out here in the open again. We know that the enemy team can be coming from several locations. So let's take a look at those places. Let's see. We're here. So your team has pushed the cart to right about there. The enemy team has the following sight lines. So they can come out from behind the sign. They can come out from this little pathway underneath, or they can come out from up here. All of which have line of sight to where you're standing. Where you can be instead of where you currently are. So you're currently like right here. However, what I might do is play over here because the cart is pushed up. It's about to be capped here. You can still have the range because you're playing Moira right now. So you still have range to heal up your team, but you don't open yourself up to every single one of these sight lines at the same time. So just think about where you can be shot from and minimize the number of angles that are available, that the enemy team has available to shoot you at from.
Line sleeping.
All right, see, we got the DPS up there. The cart has moved forward by now, so you can still kind of be behind the cart, but just think about using the cart for cover and what else you could be doing. At least keep keep a thought on whether or not you are in danger. All right, so we got the point. Right now, what I'd be doing is, because you're not really moving that fast, because the cart takes a second to transverse through the choke point here anyways. So I would probably be hitting tab again to look for changes in the enemy composition, thinking about ults that the enemy team could have online and alt combos that your team could be doing. And I'd also, so while doing this, I would just pull off to the side where I can't be shot easily. I'd also be thinking about, so after doing that, I would be thinking about where the enemy team snipers are and how to position in a way where I'm not easy to pick off coming up here. You need information. So you know this guy's here. He's being damage boosted by Mercy. That's an easy pick off if he gets lucky. Good that you've positioned out of his line of sight. This is good positioning in respect of that Hanzo. All right, so we're using our coal here, and you did kind of let people know by hitting your voice line that it's about to be up. But if you're in voice, you can just still let people know you're about to use it. Let's go in.
Run your best. Line sleeping. Go. Go.
All right, and then if you had knowledge of that hammer down there, you might have not been exactly positioned where you were, and maybe your Reinhardt would have blocked that.
Rain.
All right. Again, if you have another team fight that's been won, I would be hitting tab and figuring out what you could be doing right now. Talking about alts that are coming online, alts that we can possibly invest in the next fight, and alts that the enemy is most likely going to use. So let's see. You're hitting tab, which is good. All right, so your team has possibly Grav next fight. So you can talk about using that, and at least your team can play around it if they need to. I wasn't really paying attention while watching this to see what they've just used. But you could be looking at whether or not they have the Grav combo coming up. They already used Shatter. They just shattered you, so most likely that's not coming up. They might have that Grav combo with Hanzo. Myra possibly always has ult next fight.
3 on payroll. They got combo. Zarya Hanzo.
Nice. So the Ana actually talked about that, but that you could also be doing that. All right, so right about here, save alts. Say to save alts, especially if, like, maybe even like just before that. Right about here. No, you don't use. Save alts. That's what I'd be saying right now, because there's no need for a Grav. Your team's going to cap this point no matter what. Grav takes like 2 or 3 fights depending on the player. And sometimes it would be done in 1 fight, but a lot of times 2 or 3 fights to build up. So you just lose the Grav here because either this player, the Zarya, either lacks information to know that it's not needed because you've capped the point, or they just think it's fun to use it, or perhaps they're already planning to use it and they're going to just follow through with their plan. There may be other reasons, but if you say something like that ahead of time, you can circumvent them from using it in a lot of these situations. Okay, so we've capped the point. We're pushing through here. We need to be thinking about where the enemy team can have their DPS. So this guy's just popped out right here. That's a common spot. You also have the option of the high ground behind that. And those are the two most likely positions the sniper is going to be in. So given that idea, um, you may want to be over here to the right ahead of time until you figure out where they're at.
한조 뺏겼어.
So that.
Like your Anna's kind of out of position, and that's why she takes some damage. So fading, obviously you got to fade over to help her out. But now that you know where they are, I like the way you position here. You know, you're not getting too much into their space or into open space. You're respecting them.
Oh, sorry.
All right, they're using their grav combo again. Remember, we talked about that in the prior fight. At least your Ana did, but you could still bring it to people's attentions and thoughts because you know we're in a new fight here, and people possibly forgot about that. So
Ryan's looking.
they win that fight just because they grabbed and
That
use their
was good.
they use their out combo. I
That's
mean,
good.
all right, I skipped ahead in time a little bit here. We're approaching the card again.
No.
We need to be thinking about where the DPS can be. So they can either be up here to the top right, or they can be at those other two locations as you step in the doorway that we already discussed. So on the high ground on either side of where you're pushing the cart. Oh yeah, and I didn't think about it, but in this hallway here too. So you need to check these positions, these line of sights, and make sure that they're okay before you walk up to where you're going. Think about how you're going to be getting through this area if the enemy DPS is where in one of these positions. So, all right, you're jumping here and there's a Hanzo. You should be thinking about being behind the cart, and you don't really want to necessarily jump in front of a DPS sniper of some kind, because of any kind. I mean, because it's a little bit easier for them to kill you. So take cover. So yeah, he does hit you. You were jumping, and you're not in cover. All right. Also, that's not the best time to use this ult. You have some people dead on your team, and it's not like there's a whole lot of people available. Like I know you didn't do the grab here, but like there's not a lot of people that can take advantage of this ult, and especially since you guys are down in numbers, and the ult is being used right here at the doorway. So I don't know. I'd wait until I don't know. I would. So what should you be doing here? You should be discussing whether or not to use the ult yet, and also letting your team know that maybe we'll be looking to use it at some point. So you can prime your team to be aware that this might be happening, at the very least. All right, here we are at the next fight. All right, and you're letting people know that you have your ultimate. You have a moment here. You can be looking at what else we could be using here. So use your comms again. Talk about that you're looking to. What is your plan? So are you expecting to ult to help your team get to the point? Let them know that that you're about to do that, so they can expect to start moving when you use it. You can also talk about whether or not to wait to use the Reinhardt ult and the nano on whoever. And you could be talking about the fact that you almost have your soldier's ult. So you might say something like, all right, I'm going to ult to get into point. Don't use anything until I do. And then I might say, Ana, we almost have our visor. If you want, you can save your nano for nano visor.
Nice. Go. They don't have Zarya. Push. 한조 뺏겼어. Go.
All right, the enemy team kind of isn't in position here. So even you hear the push, that is good that your teammate is saying that so that your team can take initiative, but you don't really have line of sight on the enemy. So this kind of is largely a waste of what you can do. All right, and then you weren't thinking about ult tracking again, so you're in position for that to happen. If you had talked about that and thought about it, maybe your Ryan would be there to protect you from it and be ready for it. And also, you probably wouldn't be there
Oh
to be
no.
shattered. All right, so here's the beginning of round 3.
Okay.
This is good positioning right now. The enemy doesn't have a lot of possible sight lines in order to kill you from.
Bastion, bastion. I can't heal. I can't topple the bastion. Okay.
It's good that you stay up here and don't chase your Rhine.
Wait.
You're also standing behind cover.
Wait. I can topple.
All right, here we are, beginning of round 4.
They have Junkrat.
Good information. You know that Junkrat can spam you.
Junkrat bastion.
You can hear the Bastion. So you really need to be think about how you position when you come out here in the open, because you can just be deleted. I might have thought about fading across here. You didn't know that Reinhardt was going to put up his shield. But
Wait.
this position's good. You really eliminate what they can do to you here in the hallway.
Bastion Philippine. Oh, I'm dead. Regroup. Nice. Shoot them.
All right, so you need to be mindful of who can really kill you here. Just look at the Bastion. See what angles he has to attack you from. He can't really shoot you from everywhere. So if you're going to be standing out here in the open, at least move behind the cart so he can't shoot you. You may also want to use your right click a little bit to recharge your health. But you died here because you weren't thinking about the line of sight that this Bastion has, and he just free farms you. All right, so now we're coming up on last fight territory, and the enemy team is regrouping. So for here, I'd be hitting tab real quick to look at what DPS they have. The Ana's about to say it, but you can immediately have this knowledge and think about how you're going to position accordingly. So they have Fire Tracer, so you have a bit more freedom in what you do here because of that.
Tara maybe. Taro.
It's alright. 괜찮아, 누나, 괜찮아.
Tracer? Maybe. 3 on payroll.
All right, you could be talking about this all ahead of time, like we've discussed, and let people know what you're planning to do.
Tracer on payroll.
All right, and as you see, it looks like you have a grab going on here. So you could have comboed with your Zarya, especially if you talked about it ahead of time. You could have used that in a better way, because Coalescence in a graph, that's pretty decent. So you could have got more value out of this just because you communicated, and also because you hit tab and planned for it. Even if you don't feel comfortable talking about alts coming in line through voice, you can still look for your team to use their alts and combo with them by being aware of what's available. Thanks for watching. That concludes the review. For those of you who took up the challenge to do your own VOD review, I'm going to provide a link to a second video where I go over more of what I didn't cover in this video. You can find that link in the description below. Overwatch Educators is a subreddit that I established, and I did that because I felt like there wasn't a good source of high-level education that was free to everybody on the internet, and well, in least regards to Overwatch. And I feel as though a lot of content creators that are educational have a hard time being discovered at times because they're in the sea of other Overwatch content, like streamers and people that are entertaining, etc. It's hard to pick out and find the things that you're really looking for, and it's hard for them to reach the audience that they intend. So in an effort to change that, I created this subreddit, and I don't make any money off of this. It's just something I realized else that was willing to do it, I'm doing it. If this sounds like something you'd like to be part of, either by being a student, go over there and follow me, or follow the subreddit, I mean. If you are an educator and you want a piece of the action, getting out more of your content to everybody else in one central location, then hit me up. Go over there and get verified. Just go through the process, and we can look at some manner of finding out or establishing that you are at the rank you say you are, and then you're free to post. I don't care about how often you post. I don't care about whether it's past content, if it's VOD reviews, or if it's a tips and tricks or whatever the heck. As long as it educates people, that's fine. And I'm also okay with you talking about what you have to offer outside of that. You can tell people more about what you're doing. So just as long as you have an educational basis to it, I'm happy. The whole point of this subreddit is to be useful. So I'm not expecting things out of anybody other than to provide a forum that we can all learn more from. Very shortly, I'll go over and produce another video going over a VOD review that somebody just requested about they play Junkrat, and it's a QP game, but they couldn't figure out why they kept on dying, and they really wanted some help, and I was able to watch through it and figure it out. So if that's something that you're interested in, expect to see some of that information soon. I'll have that over on Overwatch Educators as well. If you're a student that wants a VOD review, there's a sticky thread over on Overwatch Educators. So just for VOD reviews, you can post it right there, and I'll get to it. I have the time to do it right now, so you may as well get on over there, and I can help you out. If you want to get a hold of me more directly, I'm open to talking. I'll create links to my socials below, so whatever way you use, hopefully I'll have something there for you. I'm happy to talk.